Light daily life, collapse the same man, warm blood, anime, half invincible, this is a shattered world, a story of fighting against the fate of girls named Valkyries. It should be so. During the battle, Lin Chuan fell into contemplation as he watched the Valkyrie surrounding him. Chapter 1. Kingdee, Youth, and Girls. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. How to describe the starry sky tonight. It's vast. The pitch-black night is the painting scroll, and the lights of Qianyu Academy extend into the sky, blooming with numerous stars, as if gazing at everything in the world between the light and the dark. Today is the annual campus festival of Qianyu Academy. As a tradition that has not been interrupted since the establishment of Qianyu School for 100 years, the campus festival signs are naturally grand. Not only are teachers and students taking collective holidays for free activities, but even nearby residents can come to the school to see the charm of a century-old famous school. The evening entertainment activities belong to students, with thousands of students squeezing the gymnasium tightly. The wide football field has become a performance stage, whether it is a school club or a self-formed team. As long as the team that reports before the holiday is qualified to showcase their style to students on it. At this moment, as the lingering sound of another nursery rhyme dissipated, the dignified host appeared on stage again, passionately announcing the name and performance group of the next program. Let's invite the Beichen group to bring us the program. Sword Dance. Before the Atmosphere group could shout out loud on sight, the lights in the entire gymnasium suddenly went out, leaving only the most inconspicuous gray-white light flowing down from the sky, pouring onto the girl who appeared on stage. The girl's black hair, cascading like a waterfall, was tied up into cloud temples. Her jade-like bare hands held an unpolished bamboo knife, and with a smile, the sword danced like blooming snow plums. This is a beautiful book, but the audience below couldn't help but be stunned when the girl revealed her true face. Someone around her had already recognized the performer's identity. The Thunderbolt Sprout of Me Society. Thunderbolt Sprout Clothes. As soon as the girl's real name was revealed, everyone in the audience remembered the news of Me Society President Lei Longma being arrested and imprisoned for corruption that had caused a stir in Chongqing City not long ago. As a member of the same-sex Thunder, Yai's identity naturally became much more sensitive. Most of the students are 17 or 18 years old, and their understanding of good and bad is still very superficial. Although they are not yet hostile towards the Thunderbolt Yai on stage, there is a slight change in the way they look at the girl. Of course, it's not someone who is slow to react. It's like a white-haired girl sitting in a corner, constantly listening to everything about the girl on stage, such as what the other person likes to eat and where they usually go to play, while frantically stuffing popcorn into her mouth. If we were to say who was the most anxious person in the hearts of everyone present, that person would definitely not be the Thunderbolt Yai on stage, but the host who had just stepped off the stage. Unfortunately, as the head of the Student Union Propaganda Department, he was immediately targeted by several malicious gazes, especially the head of the Kendo Society, whose angry eyes could even spew a flame. She is one of the few friends of Thunderbolt Yai. Although she is already in the past tense, as a woman, she understands the difficulties faced by the black-haired girl on stage. Once the performance is over, if the audience doesn't buy it, they naturally won't give the girl a round of applause. According to the personality of Lei Yai, who is cold on the outside and hot on the inside, it's unclear what kind of injury she might get. The host's psychology still has some weight, at least as the organizer. It is not unreasonable for him to give approval when receiving such a program. Suddenly, the range covered by the lights on the stage expanded a bit, and the black-haired girl's white dress fluttered with a touch of gold. The golden sleeves were like a butterfly, dancing gracefully around the girl. One person and one butterfly have achieved an amazing balance. The music in the sound system reached a climax, and the young girl lifted a bouquet of flowers with a bamboo knife. The flowing colors rendered a colorful world in the eyes of the audience. The bamboo sword dances rapidly, and the petals rise with the wind, weaving a brand new painting under the traction of the blade. Puff. The painting spreads from the sky, and in an instant, it seems like 100 flowers are blooming. Countless petals, under the action of the central air conditioning that increases frequency at an unknown time, fly like butterflies. The audience was stunned and didn't notice that the people on stage had already left. Only the fragrance of flowers remains. Everyone underestimated the resilience of the young girl. Suffering did not defeat her, but instead brought her unexpected growth. Unconsciously, the girl's growth pace has already surpassed theirs. Senior. Thunderbolt Yai finally found the person in his heart under a cherry blossom tree. This cherry blossom tree is considered an old tree in Qianyu Academy. As far as the old man guarding the school gate is concerned, he rolled under this tree at the age of 3. For so many years, this cherry blossom tree has been watching the changes in the college here, and can be considered the oldest existence in the entire campus. This senior always likes to daydream under this tree. The young man, known as the senior, has a radiant face. Despite not wearing glasses, he exudes a hint of scholarly charm. The boy was only wearing the standardized school uniform issued by Qianyu Academy. Strangely, there were several golden butterflies embroidered on the sleeves on both sides of his coat, which fluttered like living creatures when blown by the wind. The young man seemed to be in a daze, and after a while, he regained his senses. He looked at the girl with a slightly red face and smiled, saying, "You performed well. Why did you come out so early? I thought they would gather around you to sign." Thunderbolt Yai knew it was just teasing, so she bowed 90 degrees to the young man and said gratefully, "Thank you, Senior Lin Chuan, for everything you have done for me. My family suddenly declined, and my so-called friends scattered in response. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter." Thunderbolt Yai understands in her heart that no one has an obligation to be by her side. This is a truth she understood a long time ago. She went to see her father in prison, resigned from her position as deputy head of the Kendo Society, and built a tough coat to isolate others while also wrapping herself inside. She didn't want to hear much criticism and pretended not to care. If it weren't for the help of Senior Lin Chuan, perhaps she would have continued like this until graduation. The girl's bow made Lin Chuan feel a bit embarrassed. He shrugged his shoulders and pretended not to care, saying, "No, what can I do for you? You have a soft mouth when eating people, and a soft hand when holding people. I haven't thanked you for teaching me Beicheni Dao Lu yet. Besides, if you perform well, your skills are superb. What does it have to do with me?" The young man's pretentious appearance was somewhat humorous, and Thunderbolt Yai no longer had the mentality to care. He just silently remembered this kindness in his heart. "It's getting late, go back and rest early." Lin Chuan made a hash and took the bamboo knife from the girl's hand. He looked up and down at the girl a few times and couldn't help but exclaim, "Sure enough, a girl wearing a skirt is the most beautiful." Ignoring the abnormal blush on the girl's face, Lin Chuan turned around and left without noticing her soft moans. "Really, what are you saying?" Thunderbolt Yai felt her face scorching hot, and when she looked up again, she could only see the back of the young man. Unlike the locals, the young man's back is even more upright, looking like a sharp sword from a distance. Perhaps this is how the spine of a young man from China looks. Thunderbolt Yai tilted her head. The young man's identity was that of a Chinese international student, but in an accident, Thunderbolt Yai saw his file. In his file, he couldn't find any traces of life in China similar to his graduation school, and his whole person seemed to suddenly jump out of thin air. The only thing he knows is his super strong comprehensive ability. Thunderbolt Yai, who has been participating in club activities since childhood, naturally has extraordinary business abilities, but Lin Chuan is like a pervert. Thunderbolt Yai taught Lin Chuan that it was just a club task. At that time, Qianyu Academy was facing an exchange competition with other universities, and Lin Chuan, who usually performed well, naturally got an opportunity to participate in the competition. But to everyone's surprise, Lin Chuan, just as a scout who consumed the opponent's physical strength, staged a 3-on-1 performance at the first appearance. She was not present at the game. But I heard that Lin Chuan was quick to attack. Once he got close, it would be like a storm, and the official use of her family's EP1-10 saber flow. Why not surprise her? What surprised everyone even more was that the victory in the exchange competition became a stepping stone for Lin Chuan's progress. In just 1 year, the boy's terrifying efficiency won everyone's respect and he ascended to the position of student union president under everyone's attention. The student union of Qianyu College is not as powerful and financially strong as the student union of Shenzhou. Each term of the student union president is carefully selected. First, he was an ordinary member of the Kendo Society, then he made a remarkable achievement in the exchange competition, and finally ascended to the position of the highly anticipated president of the student union. The transformation of a young man's identity is astonishing to everyone, and Thunderbolt Yai is no exception. Amidst the turmoil of her mind, she didn't even notice a shadow spreading behind her. Chapter 2. Collapse comes. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. De Co Lois Ara Trong Quatrin Lay Text. Chapter 3. The Apocalypse and the Beautiful Girl. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. De Co Lois Ara Trong Quatrin Lay Text. Chapter 4. Brother. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Even in ruins, the sunlight does not spare its radiance, shining brightly on the earth. In front of an unknown department store, a sickle warrior wandered aimlessly. As one of the foundations of collapse, the sickle warriors have no thoughts and act solely on the killing instructions engraved in their minds by the will of collapse. As it approached an alley, a black shadow suddenly emerged from the darkness and beheaded the sickle warrior before it could react. Sharp. Lin Chuan stood up with his knife, waved at the hidden second daughter, and smiled. Let's go and see if there's anything we need to add. Thunderbolt Yai walked out of the shadow, holding a Tai Dao of the same style as Lin Chuan. Both of them have learned the Bei Chen Dao flow, and the Tai Dao is undoubtedly the best weapon for them. As for these Tai Dao, they all came from a blacksmith's shop. Of course, they all left the money behind. Although it is unknown whether the original owner will still be able to return to the blacksmith shop after the end of the world, darkness reigns in the apocalypse, and it is better to preserve one's daily habits to better preserve one's own humanity, so as not to be engulfed by the tense atmosphere of the end of the world. Let me take action next time. Kiana exclaimed discontentedly, feeling the subtle atmosphere between Thunderbolt Yai and Lin Chuan. Yai's time to see me is 10 minutes less than yesterday. Kiana was heartbroken, and she naturally believed that Lin Chuan's repeated victories in the past few days had amazed Yai, so she didn't hesitate to take on the fight. Lin Chuan didn't care about anyone actively soliciting labor. He shrugged helplessly and led the way into the department store. Destiny, Far East Branch, Council Room. In the dimly lit room, a white-haired girl who appeared to be only 10 years old sat casually on a spacious table, facing the darkness alone, with several mysterious emblems flashing in the shadows. Ms. Delisa, I heard that there has been a third collapse in Chongqing City. Don't you arrange for someone to go and take a look? A mocking voice came from all directions, and the coat of arms flickered violently, as if mocking something. You don't have to worry about this, Lieutenant Colonel Jeezy has already gone, and I believe there will be a satisfactory answer soon. Although she looks young, the girl who was replaced with Delisa answered perfectly. The developer of the burst system. The owner of the voice sounded disdainful, but fortunately, he didn't say much and left with just a few nonsensical words, probably to remind Delisa of the belonging of her camp. Accompanied by the dimness of each coat of arms, the originally dim room became even darker, until in the end, only one coat of arms, which was originally not bright, remained quietly suspended in mid-air. Delisa, I still reserve the proposal to send an S.level Valkyrie. This voice sounded a bit lazy, but Delisa understood how significant the weight of the people behind it was. It's really not possible, I can still send you Landale there. No need, thank you Grandpa. Jeezy is the captain of the 5th team of the former Valkyrie army, and she can handle it. Delisa shook her head and said, besides, the information of the new lawmaker is unclear, so acting rashly may have the opposite effect. Although there was no surprise in saying so in front of that Yulon Dyer. Delisa thought to herself. It's also good. The lazy voice was not confined to the moment, and he left with such a teasing light laugh. The room truly fell into silence now, with Delisa sitting in the center of the room, her eyes flickering with a flickering light. Now, it's up to you. Jeezy. What does it feel like being pointed at by a gun that's bigger than your face? Lin Chuan said. I am particularly panicked. Just walking into this department store for less than 10 minutes, I was momentarily knocked unconscious by someone else's stick at a corner. When I woke up again, I was facing the huge cannon mouth. This is a ferocious-looking robot, all silver in color, possibly loaded with a floating device that can hover in mid-air. This robot has an operator, at least the gray-haired girl with hair tied in double tornadoes in front of her has command authority. The girl is very cute, and when she talks about herself, she calls herself Blonia, and she names her robot Reloaded Rabbit 19C, which is of course the message that Lin Chuan heard when he was about to wake up. Strangely, the girl's actions after covering his head with a stick were limited to taking him to this warehouse, and then she remained frozen in place, seemingly talking to someone while glancing over here. Tai Dao has been confiscated and thrown into a pile of groceries 100 meters away. It is definitely not feasible to rush over and retrieve it. With the reaction speed of that machine, it is feared that he will be smashed to ashes as soon as he stands up. At a loss, the gray-haired girl made a move on her side. She drifted over under the action of the robot, hesitated for a moment, and then reached out to pat Lin Chuan's cheek. She said lightly, Blonia knows you're awake. Cough, cough. Lin Chuan awkwardly opened his eyes and felt a bit guilty when he met the girl's calm eyes. Now you have to answer a few questions from Blonia, don't lie. Blonia raised her sandbag-sized fist expressionlessly and said without any intimidation, first question, what is your name? The girl has no deterrent power, but it doesn't mean that the machine floating behind her doesn't have it. Lin Chuan reluctantly revealed his name. Lin Chuan. Blonia's expression loosened slightly and she said, the second question, where are you from? Lin Chuan tilted his head and didn't understand what she was saying for a moment, so he had to say, I was taken in by a school police officer from Qianyu Academy, but he passed away a few years ago. This is not a lie. He was found in a garbage dump when he was only 10 years old. He couldn't remember why he appeared there, only knowing that a kind old man took him in later. Unfortunately, when he was 12 years old, the old man passed away, and he couldn't see the moment when he was admitted to Qianyu Academy as the top scorer. Lin Chuan's eyes dimmed a bit, but Blonia's usually plain gray eyes flickered quietly. She quietly clicked on the communication device in her ear and whispered, Kokolia's mother, there is already a 90% chance that Lin Chuan's brother is in front of her. The other end of the communication device suddenly quieted down, and after a while, he said, I believe Blonia's judgment. But Lin Chuan has been missing for several years, will it? No way. The girl's resounding answer stunned Kokolia for a moment before she said helplessly, only when you met that kid would you do this. Protect the forest river on the task list and increase the priority level to include the lawmaker. Yes, Blonia took the initiative to hang up the communication. She realized that her heart was racing for the first time after the accident, and while catering to her mother's request, she made some moves on the task priority level. Can this be considered as the little stubbornness of girls in people's mouths? Blonia couldn't understand these words, but her heart told her that doing so was not wrong. But what she didn't know was that Coco's small movements were quietly displayed on the screen in front of her. After seeing this change, Coco was stunned for a moment and instinctively wanted to correct her daughter's wrong behavior. But is this mistake really wrong? She once had a boy, but in an accident she lost him. The boy smiled and called her mother, but she eventually abandoned him with her own hands. Tisk. Cocolia suddenly became restless and withdrew her hand from the delete button. She said fiercely, "Little bastard, it's best you're back." Duong. Lin Chuan woke up again as night approached. When he saw three girls sitting intimately together eating, he finally understood the reason why the three girls knocked him unconscious for the second time. "Good guy, you're using me as a bargaining chip to enter the internal market." Lin Chuan was enraged, and he could completely imagine that the girl had knocked herself unconscious first, and then led him to find Kiana and the others who were anxiously looking for him, and entered the team with dignity. Thunderbolt Yai was the first to notice Lin Chuan's awakening. She quickly approached and cared for him for a few words, and finally smiled after receiving a positive response from the young man. "As long as the senior is fine, thank you to Blonia for saving the senior." Lin Chuan didn't listen much to the rest of the conversation. He looked at the gray-haired girl who was still eating cola and chicken wings expressionlessly, secretly preparing a way to expose the girl. But, this technique. Why does it look so familiar? Chapter 5. Girls and Illusions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Moonlight enters the house. Qinghui sprinkled onto the pearl curtain, and the quiet balcony wandered with the drifting wind, faintly emitting the sweet aroma of delicious food. This is not the small bungalow that Kiana and her team found earlier. With more people, they naturally want to live better. A residential area of over 100 square meters is sufficient to meet the vast majority of living needs, not to mention that the owner of this room thoughtfully filled the refrigerator with food. Coupled with the resources plundered by Lin Chuan and his team during the day, it is not an exaggeration to say that it is enough for them to live for a period of time. The deceitful girl sat next to Lin Chuan. Today's chef is still Yai, which also avoids the instant noodles that Lin Chuan eats when living alone. "There's just one more dish of miso soup, that's good." Deputy Chef Kiana drooled and rushed out with a clay pot, her mouth still wet with oil stains indicating that she had secretly eaten it. Dinner is always sumptuous. A few plates of sushi, a few big meat buns, a pot of miso soup, the aroma interweaving in the air, and the cicadas chirping in the midsummer highlighting a lot at this moment. Considering Lin Chuan's status as a senior student in Shenzhou, we can only make some meat buns first. Yi's pretty face blushed slightly. Although she had been studying Shenzhou cuisine privately, she was still a novice and couldn't experiment with it at the moment when resources were not abundant. "Thank you, Yai." Lin Chuan smiled, but he didn't expect Yai to think for everyone. Moved, he picked up the buns and started eating them. Baozi is quick frozen and can be processed by steaming in the oven, but this silk does not conceal the girl's intentions. The girl even brushed a layer of jam on the baozi to achieve the goal of upgrading the taste. Taking a bite, the fragrant meat juice fills the entire mouth. Still poor soup dumplings. Lin Chuan silently remembered the girl's feelings in his heart, while Kiana, on the other hand, had long held the buns in her hands, eating them happily. The youngest Blonia naturally received careful care from Yai. It is unclear whether she saved Lin Chuan. Anyway, Yai's chopsticks always serve her food, making Kiana's eyes red with jealousy. When Lin Chuan lowered his head to drink soup, he still didn't forget to sneak a glance at the gray-haired girl. After all, the other party had knocked him out multiple times, was it just to sneak into this team? Even fools don't believe it. So, Lin Chuan took an opportunity and whispered to Kiana, "Do you think Blonia is suspicious?" Although he didn't say it explicitly, Lin Chuan felt that he had already made it clear and concise. "That's right," Kiana said without hesitation, to her surprise. "I suspect this stinky kid is trying to sneak in and steal my sprout clothes." Lin Chuan was stunned for a few seconds, as he suddenly realized that he seemed to be playing the piano against a cow. Strong enough to resist the urge to cover her face and cry, Blonia thanked Yai and left the table. Kiana was overjoyed and leaned towards Yai's direction. I'm full too. Lin Chuan stood up and chased Blonia towards the living room with a belly that was about 70.8% full. Hey! Yai was stopped by the white cat bun and couldn't stand up. She had to put down the meat bun that had already been sandwiched on the chopsticks in a dejected manner. On the other hand, the white-haired girl beside her grabbed the soup she handed her and started drinking it. She couldn't help but sigh faintly in her heart. Kiana, have you ever thought that Lin Chuan, the senior student? Ha! White-haired Tuanzi, who was immersed in delicious food and Yai, didn't even hear what Yai was saying behind her. He said directly, Lin Chuan. Lin Chuan is pretty good. He's different from the boys I've seen. His combat power is only slightly worse than Mrs. Because she was holding something in her mouth, Kiana spoke a bit vaguely, but her ambiguous words accurately conveyed the meaning. This was indeed Kiana's inner words. Lin Chuan had been fighting for several days in a row, with exquisite swordsmanship. Beichen's sword flow was so lifelike that his movements were even smoother than those of Yai. Even Miss Kiana, who is as proud and delicate as Kiana, has to admit his strong abilities. Of course I know that. Yai glanced at the living room with a hint of resentment, but after holding back, she still didn't say anything else. It's broken. Quietly nibbling on the buns, Kiana accidentally caught this gaze. Her young heart inexplicably thumped, and the sweet meat bun surprisingly surged with a sour taste. Yai. Blonia is going to take a shower. When will Brother Lin Chuan be watching Blonia? Blonia's tone seemed to never change, even if he glanced at Lin Chuan intentionally or unintentionally while hiding in the corner. Ahem. Lin Chuan threw away the covering newspaper with his back hand and said sternly, what nonsense. It happened to be passing by. As he was speaking, the panicked boy picked up the water glass on the table and started drinking, but he didn't expect it to smell fragrant, but it tasted like rubber. Blonia tilted her head and even had a puzzled expression on her face. Why did Brother Lin Chuan drink the shower gel that Sister Yai prepared for Blonia? Lin Chuan. Calmly wiping away the remaining stains from the corner of his mouth, Lin Chuan suppressed the urge to bump his head into the wall, as if unintentionally saying, so it's like this. Do you need anything else, such as a bath towel? What am I talking about? Although he was crazy inside, Lin Chuan didn't show any discomfort on the surface, he just gave a stiff smile. Blonia has already prepared everything. Blonia's clear eyes were calm, and she raised the towel in her hand, saying calmly, Brother Lin Chuan, don't worry about Blonia doing anything that will harm everyone. Blonia likes everyone, especially Brother Lin Chuan. Blonia will protect Brother Lin Chuan. Seeing his careful thoughts exposed, Lin Chuan was too lazy to continue playing. He took a step forward and said, why? And your purpose. For some reason, he couldn't bear to curse at the girl in front of him, and even hoped that the other party could give a convincing answer. What's wrong with me? Lin Chuan asked himself. Unexpectedly, the gray-haired girl simply shook her head and spoke again, Blonia can't tell Brother Lin Chuan. But Blonia wants Brother Lin Chuan to believe Blonia. Just like before. The girl stopped talking and turned to walk into the bathroom. As soon as the door closed, the girl muttered to herself. Blonia has been missing Brother Lin Chuan all along, and... The girl's voice was not loud, but it left Lin Chuan in a daze. In a daze, he seemed to see a faint blue light and shadow in a white light. Who are you? Lin Chuan couldn't help but ask. He reached out to grab it, but the person was just a fleeting sight. Brother Lin Chuan. She is a short-haired girl with a gentle voice like flowing water. Compared to the gentleness of Yai, her voice sounds more childish and shy. The girl called Lin Chuan's name directly, but Lin Chuan forgot what he had to say when he was about to blurt it out. Naturally, he forgot the girl's name. Who are you? Chapter 6. Boy and Little Rabbit. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It's clear under the sunlight. Twinkles of morning light lazily splashed through the shop window onto the young man's back. This is just an extremely ordinary convenience store, but when it collapses, it is an important supply point. Even a hope for survival. Despite facing a major disaster, the store was in good condition, and by the time the disaster struck, it was already empty. The boy was wearing a white hoodie and a matching hood that perfectly shrouded his appearance in shadow. Sour beans, seafood sauce, soybean sauce. The boy threw things into his shopping bag according to the handwriting on the note, muttering dish names one by one. Perhaps it was too focused, to the point where even a dead soldier touched his back without realizing it. Buzz. The black sickle, like the arm of a god of death, tore open a curve of death in mid-air and slashed towards the young man's neck. Lao gone. Blonia. The lines in the boy's mouth changed, and he softly called out a girl's name. Naturally, a silver-white mecha effortlessly pierced through the shop window, grabbed the hand of the deceased in the swirling silver light, and threw it onto the counter. Boom. The radio on the counter was smashed to pieces, and a rain-like electric current sound came from the broken speaker. The sound of rustling seemed like it had really rained heavily, but the boy's ears seemed to have earphones installed. Such a loud sound didn't make him turn around until the last bottle of side dishes fell into the basket. He then turned around and smiled at the gray-haired girl who had walked through the broken wall, saying, "We're all ready, it's time to go back." Blonia's answer was always so concise that she didn't even bother to glance into the smoke to see if the dead had died, so she waved her hand and let the heavy rabbit disappear into the air again. The young man is naturally Lin Chuan. Lin Chuan placed some change on the broken counter, imagining a waiter standing there smiling and saying, "Welcome back." "Definitely," Lin Chuan murmured, taking Blonia's little hand. It's strange to say that after Blonia's ambiguous explanation that night, Lin Chuan suddenly calmed down for some reason, just like his sister apologizing for her mistake and his brother couldn't blame her anymore. At that time, Lin Chuan felt this way in his heart. An inexplicable trust seems to have formed from a long time ago. Today is the third day of the collapse. Lin Chuan doesn't know if anyone will come to rescue, but he knows that in the face of a disaster, he just trusts the authorities. He really doesn't want to risk leaving the city until his hiding place is discovered. Waiting for rescue can sometimes be a solution. Not to mention facing such disasters. Collapse not only spawns human monsters like the dead, but also some creatures known as collapse beasts. Compared to the dead, the shattered beast is much more difficult to solve. No matter how strong the pale pink silicon-based shell is, the power contained in its thick forelimbs alone is daunting. Fortunately, the quantity is rare, and Lin Chuan has only seen two ends so far. The first one was seen from a distance in the previous small bungalow, with a small mountain-like body rushing like a cannon in the school. Even if it was just a collision, it was enough to cause ordinary buildings to break apart. As for the second head, it was after Lin Chuan walked out of the grocery store the 4-meter-tall body cast a huge shadow. Zhong. Lin Chuan's first reaction was to run. Perhaps the loud noise just now caught the attention of this big guy, or maybe this big guy just happened to be shopping here, but at this moment Lin Chuan didn't want anything, just wanted to follow his survival instinct as a creature and escape. Goo! The roar of the shattered beast was strange and loud, but in an instant, it noticed a small creature about to slip away under its feet. Without hesitation, it lifted its forelimbs and threw it at it. This is just a tank-level collapse beast, but for Lin Chuan at this moment, it is no different from a formidable enemy. The huge forelimbs were enough to cover up a space above the human head, and the only thing Lin Chuan could do at this moment was instinctively tug at Blonia and press her firmly onto the ground. The gray-haired girl's pupils flickered for a moment. It's Lin Chuan's taste. So familiar and comfortable. Bang! Amidst the smoke and dust, a silver light and shadow appeared in some inexplicable way from the void, firmly imprisoning the forelimb less than 2 centimeters above the young girl's head. Reinstall the little rabbit. Lin Chuan's reaction was not slow. After a few twists and turns, he escaped the attack range of the shattered beast, holding Blonia in one hand and pulling out a sword in the flickering silver light in the other. Blonia will never allow anyone to harm brother Lin Chuan. The girl's voice sounded somewhat childish and silly, but at this moment it was incredibly firm. She sat on Lin Chuan's left arm, her right hand slightly open, and her palm facing the direction of the collapsing beast. Reload the little rabbit, lift the firepower limit, fire. The firepower of the reinstalled little rabbit is beyond doubt, and even a tank-level collapsing beast is difficult to resist under a single output, howling in the midst of fireworks. Roar. The collapsing beast smashed open the cement wall on the side, even though it was heavily injured, with only a desire for destruction in its mind, there was no idea of retreating. It suddenly used the steel-reinforced concrete wall to charge towards it under the firepower of the heavily loaded little rabbit. Tisk. Precisely controlling the heavy lifting of the little rabbit was also extremely laborious. Blonia let out a muffled snort, her small body trembling a bit more. Blonia. No matter what, they are all big men. It's impolite to let a little girl fight. Lin Chuan put down the girl, grabbed the blade, and rushed out. The young boy's mind was clear to Blonia. The heavily equipped little rabbit she controlled swung a punch in the light and shadow transformation, which was not light. After breaking through 2 layers of walls, she continued to move towards the shattered beast hammer and smashed it open the building, rolling on the ground a few times before regaining consciousness. Beichen. Pull out the knife. Lin Chuan suddenly moved, covered in a blue halo, and even emitted a blue stream of light as he ran rapidly. Blonia's theory and Kiana's practical experience have ultimately given birth to a young man who can briefly use the collapse energy in the past few days. Yes, before Thunderbolt Yai could learn to use the collapse energy, Lin Chuan could already learn to use it under the guidance of 2 girls, either reliable or nonsensical. The azure pupils reflect the twisted body of the shattered beast, and the sharp sword light almost instantly cleaves half of its body. The broken beast has no blood, but it does not affect the habitual blood shock action of the youth when harvesting the knife. So handsome. Blonia approached, her eyes as if nothing had happened, as calm as ever. But Blonia must remind Lin Chuan that this move has just been learned by Lin Chuan, and there will be a temporary gap after he uses it. Moreover, with Lin Chuan's current sword technique, there is still a 5% chance that the move will fail. Cough. Pay attention next time, pay attention next time. Lin Chuan coughed a few times and his old face turned slightly red. I don't know why, but whenever he fights in front of Blonia, he always shows off a bit intentionally or unintentionally, like a little boy showing off his newly learned Thunderbolt Half-Moon Slash to his sister. But it's really handsome, just like the big shots in the Battle of Roars. Blonia opened her mouth but didn't say anything. What she is better at is data analysis of Lin Chuan's brother's mistakes. This may be better for you. Blonia thought to herself. Chapter 7. The highest configuration of the game. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Click and wipe. Although it was just an ordinary twisting sound from the entrance, it made Kiana jump up from the sofa and turn her head towards the direction of the door. Yai yai. Lin Chuan and the others are back. The white-haired girl shouted heartlessly, while the black-haired girl walked out of the kitchen and took the vegetable basket from the returning boy's hand. As soon as the gray-haired girl entered the door, she pounced on the game console that had been separated for several hours. The noon sun fell quietly on the young girl through the window. Even if it is as fiery as it is, I have to admit this beauty. How's the situation today? Thunderbolt Yai served Lin Chuan like a virtuous wife, taking off his hoodie and casually showing a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Almost. Lin Chuan said in a deep voice, pulling down the sword from behind with one hand and holding down the head that Kiana was frantically poking towards him with the other. There aren't as many dead warriors as there were at the beginning. Kiana, don't grab them, I've taken a lot of potato chips. Is this a good change? Yai pondered, but Blonia, who was playing games in the living room, responded, Blonia detected today that the concentration of air collapse has decreased by 5%, and the frequency of death activities has decreased by 30%, but today. Anyway, it can be considered good. Lin Chuan smiled and restrained the girl from saying anything about encountering the shattered beast. Yai was too emotional, and saying so would make her worry for nothing. Blonia understands that although she lacks emotions, she is by no means lacking emotional intelligence. Moreover, Blonia doesn't want Sister Yai to worry. That's good. Yai smiled and nodded, then turned around and walked into the kitchen. What do you want to eat for lunch today? The things made by Yai are all delicious. Kiana ran into the kitchen with a bag of potato chips, probably trying to grab something to eat. You. The sound of the girls playing became distant, and Lin Chuan shrugged his shoulders and naturally sat next to Blonia. With a smile on his lips, he said, give me a handle, I'll come too. Blonia took out another game controller and set the game to two-player mode, saying expressionlessly, so far, although Lin Chuan's gaming level has improved rapidly, it is not enough to compete with Blonia. It is expected that Lin Chuan's probability of winning is less than 3%. Anyway, it's much stronger than Kiana's 0.001%, isn't it? Lin Chuan casually selected his favorite character and clicked on the dual interface. Besides, playing the game alone would be too boring, wouldn't it? Blonia remained silent for a while before saying, Blonia doesn't understand. There used to be people playing games with Blonia, but after losing a few times, they stopped playing. Welcome to the roaming canyon. Game begins. Lin Chuan cracked the game controller and said with a smile, then he really can't afford to lose. No, Blonia admires him very much. Blonia shook her head and her fingers twitched rapidly on the handle. He always maintains good relationships with everyone, and everyone likes him very much. Although he is sometimes cautious, Blonia knows he just wants to protect everyone. Blonia is familiar with battlefield analysis, but in his opinion, data is just data. He said, if a person determines something based solely on data, then he will definitely lose a lot because of it. The head count in the upper left corner refreshed again, and Lin Chuan hesitated for a moment before directly saying, psychologically speaking, he may be a bit lonely. Lonely people always disguise themselves as easy to get along with, but they still fear failure because they can't afford to lose anything. Blonia rarely withdrew her gaze from the game and turned to one side, saying, Blonia doesn't understand, but Blonia will definitely understand. Blonia wants to share his loneliness. I will. Lin Chuan smiled and encouraged, thinking to himself that this person must be very important to Blonia, otherwise he wouldn't have said things like sharing loneliness. At this point, the game has entered a state of intense heat, and Blonia's Roar Knight has already entered the towering tower of the Roar King controlled by Lin Chuan. Lin Chuan quickly presses the button, and the Roar King on the screen rises into the air. Countless sharp swords appear from behind and stab towards Lin Chuan. Yes. The anime characters seem to have the power of the third dimension. Countless sharp swords zoomed in through Lin Chuan's pupils through the screen. He instinctively pushed Brunia away from sitting next to him, but he pounced empty. What's going on? There was no time for contemplation at all, and countless sharp swords seemed to pierce straight into the young man's soul, causing a tearing pain to erupt in the depths of his soul. Behind the sword lies endless light and heat. The buzzing in his ears disappeared completely at the moment when his eardrum tore, and the heat wave enveloped Lin Chuan's body. His skin evaporated everywhere, and his bones groaned under the heavy pressure. After extreme pain, his brain seemed to have cleared up a space. At this moment, he calmly accepted all of this. But, God, please bless this child. Black abyss and white flowers. Holy blood liberation. White flowers stain blood. Two clear or gentle voices directly reflected in Lin Chuan's mind, and a vast sea of sadness surged in his heart at this moment. Who is it? In a daze, purple and white intertwined, as if building a big web. Imprisoned him. Protected him again. Shoo. At this moment, a hole broke through the grid and a grey shadow ran out. That is a very familiar thing, but I can't remember it clearly anymore. Lin Chuan reached out to reach for it, which was also clever. Under the guidance of the young man's fingertips, it turned into a flowing substance that penetrated his chest, rippling with the coolness of a clear spring in the mountains. In the final perspective, Lin Chuan caught a glimpse of the sleeping face of a purple-haired girl. Quiet like a baby. Familiar yet unfamiliar. Lin Chuan. Lin Chuan. Someone is calling me. Lin Chuan instinctively opened his eyes, and Kiana's big face almost pressed against his own. What are you doing? Lin Chuan turned his head and found that Yai and Blonia were also present, and even Blonia's machine had several wires connected to him. Seeing that the person was fine, Kiana casually crossed her waist and said, Lin Chuan, you have a high fever and won't tell us, but you are so anxious about us. Have you a fever? Lin Chuan instinctively probed his forehead, although it was a bit hot, it was not yet at the level of a high fever. On one side, Kiana spoke up and even added a gesture. You don't know, the moment you fell, we were all scared out of our wits. With a thump sound, it kept ringing. The white-haired girl rolled up her sleeves and showed off her muscles, which were less than 2 liang, proudly saying, in the end, miss, I lifted you onto the sofa. Blonia, the little one, checked your body, but only had a fever. You kept saying it was so cold. Despite being within reach, the girl's voice seemed to be blown further and further away by the wind. Lin Chuan stepped into a swamp, and with a slight movement, she would sink downwards. Lin Chuan shook his head and stood up as if out of the sea of suffering. He awkwardly looked at the stunned girls and said, I'm sorry to trouble you. Lunch was placed on the nearby table, and the heat had dissipated almost. It seems that the girls didn't even take a few bites to take care of themselves. In addition to being moved, Lin Chuan became somewhat curious about that seemingly realistic dream. After all, he had never seen those scenes before, and the feeling of being on the brink of death was also his first experience. How can we say? It's all considered a brand new experience. Lin Chuan's great nerves restrained his thoughts, and before he could say anything to comfort everyone, palpitations from the bottom of his heart were like being targeted by a venomous snake, and a piercing chill rushed from his feet to his head. The cold grey shadow blooms at this moment. Enemy attack. Chapter 8. Why? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Boom. At this moment, smoke and dust burst into the sky. Cough. Kiana rolled out of the smoke with a grey head and face, looking at the lunch that had fallen to the ground. She felt a pang of regret in her heart and quickly shouted, Yai. Yai. Yai, are you okay? The white-haired girl shouted at the top of her lungs, as if the person calling was the most precious treasure in the world. The fear of Shu Yuan once again overwhelmed Kiana. Cough. Kiana, I'm here. Fortunately, heaven treats her well. Thunderbolt Yai walked out of the smoke and dust. In fact, the two of them were not far apart after the accident, but buried in different places inside the broken wall. Yai. Kiana was overjoyed. Although Yai was a bit embarrassed, at least she was fine, didn't she? She really didn't know what she would become after losing Yai here. Yai, come over quickly, it's dangerous there. As she spoke, the white-haired girl threw herself into the arms of the black-haired girl, greedily sucking on the faint body fragrance. Don't make a fuss. Yai affectionately wiped the slightly disheveled face of the white-haired girl and suddenly said nervously, Kiana, what's the situation now? Kiana shrugged her nose and awkwardly scratched her head, saying, things happened so suddenly that I didn't react, hee hee. By the way, Yai suddenly seemed to remember something and stretched her neck to look at him from afar. The senior and Blonia are both missing, they won't be in danger, will they? Yai has someone else in her heart. Although feeling a bit disappointed, Kiana also understood that this was not the time to get angry. She immediately said, "Don't worry, Yai, I will protect you." She confidently patted her slightly curved chest, without any conscious loss of her weapon. Kiana. Yai felt a touch of emotion in her heart. How long has it been since her father was imprisoned that she hasn't received any attention from others? If it weren't for the presence of Senior Lin Chuan and Kiana's arrival, perhaps she would have become a depressed person. Two young girls stood up side by side, their black and white hair intertwined in the wind. At this moment, a sound of breaking wind sounded from the corner. Before Kiana could react, the thick smoke broke through and Lin Chuan rolled out with a grey head and face, his posture somewhat similar to Kiana's. Fortunately, when I came out, Yai was not there. Kiana thought happily. Lin Chuan. Are you okay? Yai moved forward with some worry, and in his anxiety, he even omitted the senior that was often mentioned in his daily life. Not very good. Lin Chuan was a bit disheveled now, with his disheveled head and unkempt face all set aside. There were still a few scratches on his body, and fine blood dripped down from his wounds. He didn't care about his wounds, just opened his hands and revealed the gray-haired girl in his arms. His face looked a bit ugly. "It's a temple-level collapse beast, it found us." "What?" The girls' faces turned pale with iron. The temple-level collapse beast can easily grow up to a height of 10 meters, which is rare even in large-scale collapse accidents. However, unfortunately, this rare existence was encountered by Lin Chuan and his team. The tip armor of the collapse beast launched an attack directly on the place where several people lived. If Lin Chuan did not give an immediate warning, they would probably have to be accountable today. "Brother Lin Chuan, you're injured." Blonia grabbed Lin Chuan's collar tightly, and for the first time, Kue Wubua's voice trembled. The accident happened too quickly. At the moment of the accident, Lin Chuan only had time to shout and roll to the corner holding the nearest Blonia, while also kicking Yai and Kiana away. However, the cost of this extra action was that his right foot was firmly stabbed by a steel bar. Blood is like pouring in. Tisk. Lin Chuan, who was out of his tense state, naturally felt the burning pain. He looked up at the girls, but it was as if he had been frightened. Blonia's performance was relatively calm, and Yai's small face had already turned pale. Even the nervous Kiana's face turned pale. Night and day flashed before Lin Chuan's eyes, a symptom of excessive bleeding. Damn it! He couldn't help but understand what a leg injury meant to Lin Chuan now. Blonia. Let's go, that collapsing beast will soon discover us. Lin Chuan cannot do anything to replace others and let others die for him. Without hesitation, he said to Blonia, as the most rational person in this world, he believes Blonia can come up with the optimal solution. Blonia knows. Blonia held hands with Yai and Kiana without hesitation. Blonia, no. Little devil, you. Without hesitation, Blonia activated the maximum power of the suspension device, and the silver mech picked up Lin Chuan, who had given up on herself, and raced in one direction. The gray-haired girl spoke expressionlessly, "I'm sorry, Brother Lin Chuan." Blonia's nervous system told Blonia that she would never give up on Lin Chuan. Blonia, no one wants to die, Lin Chuan is the same. It was his conscience to let Blonia and the others go first, but deep down in his heart, he also longs to live. If Lin Chuan wants to distract the enemy alone, Miss Ben won't agree. Kiana showed off her sandbag-sized fist and pretended to be angry. Yai stared at Lin Chuan for a long time, then turned to look at Blonia and said apologetically, "Blonia, I'm sorry, I didn't believe you." Sister Yai doesn't need to apologize, Blonia isn't angry, Blonia said without looking back. Blonia won't give up on anyone, and there's a 20% chance she can run away. 20%. Lin Chuan's eyebrows twitched in pain, but when he turned around, he saw that the giant shadow had already revealed its glowing pupils. Is there a 20% chance that you will run away on your own? Lin Chuan thought calmly, seeing that Blonia's forehead was already covered in fine beads of sweat, and that Yai and Kiana, who had not eaten lunch, had reached their limit by now. The temple-level collapsing beast eventually discovered the fleeing individuals, but the efforts of the young girls and boys raced against time as it accelerated and disintegrated. It raised its sharp tip and, as the shadows grew larger, its attack shattered the entire street. Boom! The concrete street turned upside down, and 2 rows of neatly arranged landscape trees were torn into sawdust by the strong wind. Cluck! The shattered beast roared awkwardly, as if singing something. It really hurts. The weak voice dissipated from the smoke and dust. The gray shadow appeared in the smoke and dust, and the sharp horns of the collapsing beast pierced into this layer of membrane-like material. Cough! Lin Chuan spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. His lungs were punctured to pieces, and his bones instantly crumbled into fragments. He knelt on one knee and stretched his hands as wide as possible, like a hen guarding a chick. Oh, it's a rooster. Lin Chuan smiled self-deprecatingly, blood surging from the corners of his mouth. Well, this is not a good metaphor. The slightly pink pointed diamond pierced through the membrane and pierced his entire body directly from behind. Blood flows unstoppably, converging under the body into a small pond. Lin. Yai was frightened, her eyes widened, but her pupils contracted to the size of a needle tip. Tears quietly slid down her pale face. Hoo. Lin Chuan felt like his breath was blowing a fan, and exhaustion was constantly invading him. Don't cry. It's so big. Blonia was held in her arms at the very last moment, and Kiana and the heavy bunny withstood the final impact for her. Lin Chuan smiled and blood stained his teeth, saying, "Yes. I can't afford to. Yeah. Yai, I can't take care of you anymore." Why Thunderbolt Yai's throat seemed to be choked by something, and she couldn't even say the simplest syllable. Tears flow uncontrollably, diluting the blood on the face that's his blood. Why, perhaps due to congestion in his eyes, Lin Chuan's eyes became blurred, and the most concise lines became like a paste in his eyes. He could only reach out to the gray patch based on his feelings. Bu Luo. Nia. He didn't touch her because his legs were weak and his flesh was bruised below his knees. The strength of the shattered beast was too strong for him to fully resist, and his legs were twisted to pieces on the ground. 4. Why? Yai murmured, as if returning to the cold bed at home. That was the first few days of my father's arrest and imprisonment. She was so scared that she couldn't fall asleep. Because I'm afraid of dreaming of my father walking to the execution ground. She is afraid. Wandering, until the young man, like a god, descended tomorrow, carrying the sunshine and inviting her back to life. He smiled and told her that the world was really beautiful. She believed it. So, in order to punish her innocence, the gods took back the boy again. Is that right? Collapse. 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 The high wall in my heart is as fragile as tofu. Yai smiled and said to her, "Are you here? You're a coward. The conquered lightning is brewing in the air." Why? It's me. Why? Force me. Why? Help me. Chapter 9. Saint Freya. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is the Dean's office of Saint Freya. Dean Delisa works here. Delisa. Accompanied by an anxious call, Wulyan Tajizi pushed the door in without any ladies to speak of. She was so scared that Delisa didn't even hide the comic in her hand. Her hand holding the comic was raised high, but it didn't fall. Tisk, Jeezy looked at the strange posture of the white-haired girl with disdain. Seeing the matter exposed, Teresa smiled and caressed the Judas oath placed next to her, while throwing the manga out the window from afar. Jeezy, what's up? The 7 or 8-year-old girl's fingers were bulging, and her wise smile seemed to freeze on her face. Cough. Jeezy shuddered for a moment and quickly changed the topic. They're back. Have you read all those materials? That's it. Delisa glanced at the piles of documents on the table, blushing as she climbed over it. She coughed for a moment and said nonchalantly, I was just about to watch, where did it come from? She even flipped through the mountain of documents on the table to match her performance. GZ. She couldn't bear to watch anymore and walked up to light up the display screen embedded on her desk. The Concise System desktop successfully accumulated 99 plus messages called Dreams of Billion Teenagers. Cough. Delisa suddenly felt a burning sensation on her face, so she quickly clicked on the message and selected the latest few projections. These are all survivors of the Chongqing city collapse, a total of 4 people. The situation was urgent, and Jeezy did not pursue the school principal's paddling. With her fingers twitching, she pulled out several panels, which were naturally the information of the 4 people. Surprisingly, there were male survivors of this collapse event. GZ retrieved a piece of information. Compared to the information of the other 3 girls, the information of this young man named Lin Chuan was much less. There are so many collapse events in the world, and it's not impossible to have a few male survivors. Teresa murmured, flipping through the boy's information and couldn't help but let out a soft sigh. This boy is still a black man. There's no information before the age of 14. Shouldn't it be, even the Far East branch can't be found. The Tianming Jidong branch is in charge of the Jidong region, and when it comes to data collection, only the Tianming headquarters database can possibly surpass it. If the Jidong branch database wants to search for information about a person, it can even search for that person's information from tens of thousands of surveillance cameras, so there will be no omissions. However, this young man, like suddenly appearing, has lost all the information from the past 14 years. Lin Chuan. He's from China. Delisa lightly tapped the table, her serious expression making people want to pinch her face even more. Yes, this person first appeared at the enrollment ceremony of Chinyu Academy in 2003, when his guardian was an old-school police officer. Jeezy's expression was unprecedentedly solemn, and she said in a deep voice, but where did this old-school police officer meet him, and under what circumstances did he adopt him? We have no way of investigating. Of course, this has nothing to do with us. Jeezy spread out her hand and interrupted Delisa's desire to continue listening. With a hint of melancholy in her blue eyes, Teresa pressed her temple helplessly and said, What are you going to say? Kiana and the others have been waking up for a few days. If there's nothing else, let's arrange for them to enroll. Don't worry, the real bulk goods are still ahead. GZ quickly operated on the screen and called up a medical examination report, seeming puzzled. Delisa, how high do you think a normal male's resistance to collapse can be? GZ. I really doubt if the salary I've been giving you over the years is too much, Delisa said with a disdainful expression, and then carefully thought about it. Grandpa's research is about 60%, and the stronger one is the level of AC.level Valkyrie, but it won't be much better. Delisa's grandfather is naturally Archbishop Naoto, the current ruler of destiny, and also a great scientist. At least the theory he proposed has not been broken by anyone, including the topic of male breakdown resistance. But this child. GZ smiled and said word by word, his resistance to collapse is 98%. Impossible. Teresa's pupils shrank slightly, and she stood up from the chair in excitement. Her watery eyes were filled with disbelief. Even in the destined Caslana family, there are few people with a resistance to collapse exceeding 90%, let alone men. I just found out that would be similar to this reaction, GZ said with a bitter smile, but the fact is, the test was conducted several times. The spacious office fell into silence for the first time. For a long time, Delisa stared at Jeezy with a burning gaze and said directly, "Jeezy, do you understand what this means?" Jeezy squinted her eyes and said, "S.level. Martial God." After finishing speaking, everyone couldn't help but take a cold breath. Jeezy suddenly smiled and said, "We've found a treasure this time. Let's first ask him if he's willing to join us. If he's willing, it's us who have to work hard." Delisa finally sat down and suddenly remembered something, glaring angrily at Jeezy. "I almost forgot, you rampage woman. You actually used that unfinished system. Don't you know your physical condition?" Jeezy shrugged and said nonchalantly, "There's nothing I can do. The law of thunder is too strong. If I don't use it, I'm afraid even Hubrian won't be able to retreat completely." "But it's also too." Delisa frowned tightly, but didn't say anything. She knew exactly what character Jeezy had. This class of students is not easy to take care of. Delisa sighed sincerely. "Do you mean to say that?" Jeezy chuckled angrily and couldn't help but say, "I take care of all the students. When aren't you reading your comic book well? Where is it?" Teresa argued in disbelief, and then as if she remembered something, her adorable eyebrows furrowed again. "That child seems to be seriously injured, can it be saved?" Jeezy suddenly fell silent and didn't answer her question immediately. After a long time, she said softly, "Delisa, maybe we're all busy." That child seems to be a lawmaker." Dong. Delisa kicked her knee onto the desk, but she didn't say a word and had a strange expression on her face. Today's mood can be described as ups and downs, and now Delisa is like winning 1,000,000 beautiful comics in a lottery and realizing that she read them wrong. Have we all become law enforcement concentration camps here? I estimate it is. Delisa took a few quick breaths, as if comforting herself or someone else. "It's okay. The law of thunder has arrived, and we still need another one." Jeezy scratched her head. This matter was not within her ability, at most she could be considered an accomplice. "Just guessing. What is the child's authority?" Delisa believes that Jeezy is not aimless, and since everyone says so, there must be a reason for her. "It is the law of death." Delisa. Chapter 10. Corridor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lin Chuan walked alone in the dark corridor. Where is this? Darkness brings not only visual deception, but also psychological torment. The dark space was lonely and lifeless, not to mention the human voice, even the ubiquitous insect chirping disappeared and disappeared. The narrow corridor echoed with the footsteps of the young man. Step 308. Lin Chuan silently counted the steps he had taken. Perhaps darkness and loneliness were torture for others, but for him, they were just commonplace. Am I dead? Lin Chuan suddenly remembered the huge collapsing beast, with its sharp-pointed diamond hole piercing into its body. The sudden pain and bone-chilling chill were so clear in his memories, and his memory still lingered in the scene of a black-haired girl crying uncontrollably. Really, even though she was told not to cry. Lin Chuan shook his head secretly. He knew about the personality of Thunderbolt Yai. If we were to say why he cared so much about him, perhaps it was an unexpected encounter that afternoon. The afternoon sunshine is no longer scorching, and people are happy to do their own things at this time. Lin Chuan is no exception, and all he needs to do is search through the trash cans in Chongqing City and find some things that can be sold for money, such as plastic bottles. That is a rudimentary alley. He was beaten for the first time in his memory, simply because he accidentally broke into the territory of several homeless people and picked up plastic bottles there. Fists, kicks, sticks, and the vagabond's gameplay are all extreme, with punches and kicks falling as a means of taking a person's life. Fresh blood is sweet and fishy, Lin Chuan only then understood. Stop. The innocent and clear voice drew a stop to this one-sided bullying. Under the golden afterglow, a gentle light brushed over the girl's sailor uniform. The girl held up her bamboo knife and said indignantly, "Please stop, this is not right." Not right. Lin Chuan lay on the ground, his vision blurred by the blood oozing from the corners of his eyes. But he could still hear that when the girl scolded the homeless man, his first reaction was to want to laugh. There's nothing right or wrong, it's just about wanting to live. At that time, Lin Chuan despicably thought that as long as these homeless people attacked the girl, he would turn his head and run away. Anyway, beautiful girls would always be protected by their families. As expected, the girl's attraction was much greater than that of Lin Chuan, a little homeless man. A few big men approached the girl with a grimace and their mouths twitched with dirty words. "You! Don't come over." After all, the black-haired girl is just a child, even though she holds the famous Baichani Dao flow in her hand. Yai, if you run away secretly, it's not something girls do. Just as Lin Chuan was about to take advantage of the chaos and slip away, the black-haired man who appeared in front of the girl in an inexplicable way pulled away several homeless people. By the time they landed, his black umbrella was already blooming like cherry blossoms. That was the first time Lin Chuan witnessed absolute power. "Dad!" The girl cheered and jumped. The man picked up his daughter and glanced at Lin Chuan, who was covered in mud. He smiled and said, "Next time, if you want to hit many people, you can attack the leader. At this point, you may be beaten very badly by others, but when you defeat the leader, everyone else will be afraid of you." This is the first and last sentence left by the man to Lin Chuan. From then on, he disappeared into the life of a teenager, but his actions made Lin Chuan realize his inferiority and the value of his strength. Later on, life miraculously improved. Although it was not enough to have 3 meals a day, it was still able to ensure basic living. In the end, it was even able to be adopted and truly live one's own life. A few years later, when the man was imprisoned, Lin Chuan saw his benefactor again on TV and learned that the man was named Thunderbolt Dragon Horse, and his daughter Thunderbolt Yai was studying at Qianyu Academy. That's why Lin Chuan chose to approach the girl when everyone was away from Yai because of Thunderbolt Dragon Horse. Nowadays, Yai probably doesn't remember such a thing anymore. He would just obediently call himself Senior Lin Chuan, but only Lin Chuan knew that he owed them a "thank you" and "sorry." The corridor seemed to have no end, but Lin Chuan still walked leisurely, with darkness as his playmate and loneliness as his longest companion. Shoo! Like a broken eggshell, Lin Chuan stepped into the shattered space, and the dark space exploded with a low moan. Brother Lin Chuan. At first glance, it was a snow-white expanse. Hey! The vocal cords seemed to be dug out of the desert, and Lin Chuan murmured dryly and hoarsely, "I'm still alive." His right hand was motionless, and Lin Chuan turned his head slightly. The black-haired girl tightly hugged his shoulder, and a slight breath of sandalwood sprayed on his neck, itching. Lin Chuan. Oh, probably dead, otherwise how could my body be so heavy? Lin Chuan lifted his head with difficulty, a petite gray-haired girl lying on top of him, her emotionless gray eyes staring at him like 2 surveillance cameras. "Brother Lin Chuan, are you awake?" Blonia asked mercilessly. No. Even if he closed his eyes in despair, Lin Chuan couldn't escape the awkward situation of facing 5 pairs of eyes in a moment. Blonia is fine, the 3-nosed girl remains expressionless on the ground as usual. On the other hand, Yai's face was blushing with embarrassment, like a little cat stealing fish. Compared to that, Kiana was indignant, her lake blue eyes seeming to spew out substantial flames. In order to ease the embarrassment, Lin Chuan tactically drank water and turned his gaze to Delisa, who looked like an outsider on the side. He hesitated and said, "So. Now I can be considered a student of Saint Freya, and can I continue to be?" "Of course." As the principal, Delisa stood up confidently, as long as you don't betray Saint Freya, you will be our student. The benefits offered by Saint Freya Academy are not only generous, but even almost to the point of being a prostitute. Its goal is also very clear, which is to have Lin Chuan agree to become their student and assign work after graduation. But there is no free lunch in this world, free is the most expensive. Is the job of Valkyrie to eliminate collapse and protect the world? Lin Chuan can only understand it in the way of international special forces. That's about it. GZ spoke up and smiled, we are a school that cultivates female martial gods. You can understand it as a semi-managed military school. Why save me and choose me? This is the question that Lin Chuan really wants to ask. After all, as he is about to enter a strange world, he must first understand what he has worth paying attention to. GZ and Delisa exchanged a glance, and they were already prepared for this. Because you are different, as one of the few men who can control the collapse ability, you have enough qualifications to join this school and become a Valkyrie. To be precise, it is not a minority, but a unique family. GZ secretly said in her heart. Lin Chuan pondered for a moment, then looked up and saw the tense and eager gaze of Yai, as well as Kiana who occasionally glanced over here. Blonia sat quietly on the bed, without saying a word, but her grey eyes seemed to speak. I believe Lin Chuan's choice. Are you fighting against the so-called collapse disaster with them fighting for all the beauty in the world it seems? Quite good. I joined.